we just did a poll almost every year. It's your first DevCon. A lot of you have been developing with FileMaker Pro for less than 3 years. And I think probably by now you've realized that when it comes to FileMaker, it's not just about coding. There's design involved with it too. So that's why I did this class for beginners, because if it's not something you put a lot of thought into when learning FileMaker, I want you to start thinking about design as much as the functionality. So let's start with who I am. I'm originally from the Chicago area. I moved to Las Vegas about 4.5 years ago, and I will die there. These are my boys. My 2 boys, Jordan and Aaron, are actually in their 20s now, and I'm going to embarrass him because Aaron is here for his very first DevCon. He's the one that's laughing on the right. Aaron, stand up, just wave to everyone. Okay, he's not standing. It makes me proud that he's following in my footsteps, and hopefully he enjoys this conference as much as I did, especially my first year going. I didn't have boys, so I adopted a couple of girls. They're old ladies now. My passion is really baking. I've been told I make a pretty mean cheesecake. And my fun is riding around on this, especially in Nevada. But I have been developing with FileMaker Pro for almost 30 years, and this will be my 15th DevCon, and it's my 3rd DevCon that I'm speaking. I use FileMaker Pro all the time for myself. And I was also an in-house developer when I first started with FileMaker, so I wore the hat of the user as well as the developer. And so I really oftentimes think about the user's experience. We are going to break the session into 3 parts: design, user interface, user experience. All of these things kind of overlap each other, but I wanted to kind of put it in an organized way for our brains to think about. And I have so much information to tell you that I'm probably going to talk fast. So if there's something that I say that you want me to expound on, I'm really trying to get this done so there can be questions at the end. Just make a note of it, and then I'll try to address any of your questions or go further with a thought later on in the session. So when you've been in this field for as many years as I've been, you have the conversation many times about form over function versus function over form. I believe that form equals function, that the design is just as important, and especially nowadays when there's so many apps out there that are designed so well, that's really your competition. You want things to look and feel as good to the user as it is to actually use the software. Just a quick little tidbit here. I have a Ducati, and Ducati put the side mirrors in a place that most motorcycles are not. And it has an issue when you get over 60 miles an hour that the side view mirrors shake so bad you can't see anything behind you because they're basically useless. And in the process of putting together my session, I was on a Ducati forum regarding these side view mirrors, and I saw this little comment from one of the people on the thread. And the last sentence says, "Ducati went for form over function to this bike, it's simple." And it just made me chuckle. Okay, so with design, this part of the session really has a lot more to do with the developer than the user. And so what do I mean by that? So the first part of design is flow. How the system flows, not just the layout, but how the whole process of the system works. Do you want to tell your users to don't be happy, worry? Or do you want to tell them to don't worry, be happy? The fit is how does it all fit on the screen? And it should not look like this since FileMaker 3. I don't even know if that's not even a FileMaker database, but I've seen them look like this. We have so many tools to us now that help us prevent doing this. We've got popovers and cards and tabs and slides and new layouts. They're so much easier to make than they used to be. So the idea is not to overwhelm the user. Standards are really about the developer because the user really never gets into what things look like under the hood. But as a developer, you should come up with your standards, how you're going to name your fields, how you're going to name your table occurrences, what your relationships graph is going to look like, what sort of security are you going to have, how you're going to do your scripts. And when we get into my little theme demo, I'm going to go through and give you some opinions on how I set mine up. But remember, with FileMaker, there's so many ways to do things. So I'm going to throw out some opinions and some ideas, and as a developer, you have to decide what works for you. And there are so many places on the internet that you can Google and see opposing views to mine and kind of decide what works for you. Developer preferences, what I mean by that is, do you want to show what custom menus do you want to show the users? Do you want to show them the toolbars or hide the toolbars? We've got now the predefined fields in FileMaker 17. There's on Google, you can Google it again, there's ways to find out how to change that XML file. So those fields that you want to have in every table you create, you could have FileMaker 17 automatically create it when you create the table. What I do now is I duplicate tables and then I rename everything, and I'm not going to have to do that anymore because those standard fields will automatically come in. And then the other thing is, there's always a unified database versus a separation model. There's been discussions about this for years. A separation model is where you have two files, one is the UI and one is the data. And so the idea is that whenever you want to overhaul the UI, you can do that, and all you do is slide that new file in and you've never touched the data. And there's pros and cons to doing it that way in FileMaker, just as there are keeping everything in the same file. One of the nice things with this new data migration tool is one of the arguments for the separation model kind of goes away, because the argument is that it keeps your data intact and you don't have to worry about migrating the data. But with this new migration tool, that makes it a little easier. What I was originally going to do was break this up and do some slides and then do a demo and slides and demo. But I have to switch my screen to extended versus mirroring, and I don't want to waste time doing that. So I'm going to go through the slides, and then I'll do all the demos at the end. So user interface, what I mean by that is it intuitive? Which one is more intuitive to you? Is it inviting? By the way, that's not my cheesecake. That one is. When you look at something like this, how does it make you feel? This is like fingernails on a chalkboard to me. And I have had conversations with people where that doesn't bother them at all. So as a developer, what I want you to do is I want you to put yourself in the shoes of the users. Maybe that doesn't bother you, but you have to think about your users. That will probably bother them. So you want to keep that in mind when it comes to design. I want to apologize if this is your kitchen. This, to me, is not a usable kitchen. If I want to bake a cheesecake, I don't know how to do it. That kitchen is not inviting to me. And in fairness to this website, it kind of looks like one of those that you used to design on your own way back when the internet first started. So I'm just using really drastic examples to show you that that's your first impression is your design when somebody comes in. They don't start using the system until they look at the system. So design is very important. And then we come to user experience, how the user uses the system. And as developers, we can sit down and we can blueprint everything out, we can design it and design it and design it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's how the user is going to use it. So you need to make sure that you get feedback along the way. Because when you start using the system, are you sending the right message? Or is it frustrating? I had a kitchen like that I was renting a house when I first moved to Las Vegas, so that's actually true. And on top of all of that, how is your data integrity? If your data is not intact, it defeats the whole purpose of a database. So when you're developing, you have to know how to develop for the data as well. Then there's a couple things to keep in mind when it comes to WebDirect and when it comes to iOS. So with WebDirect, there's no new windows. There is, but it's a virtual new window. Cards are not available. Custom menus are not available. You have to think of performance more when it comes to WebDirect, because now you're on the web versus intranet or whatever. And tabbed interfaces are really hard to draw. So that's something you want to avoid when you're doing WebDirect. Pop-up menus and checkboxes are kind of a pain. Pop-up lists are okay, but pop-up menus are a pain. So there's just certain things you'll learn as you go, but certain things you want to know on the way so you can avoid catastrophes. The other thing is hidden objects. If you hide, let's say you have two fields in WebDirect and one of them is kind of grouped in a certain way, and even though it's hiding and the field you want to see is showing, you may not be able to get in there and actually data enter. So you have to kind of play around with how you're hiding your fields and grouping your fields. The other thing with WebDirect is, this is actually a WebDirect layout. That top red and yellow thing is a button bar with rounded edges. It's not the segments that are rounded, it's the edges. And that's what it looks like in FileMaker. That's what it looks like in WebDirect. So build it in FileMaker, but look at it on a browser to make sure. The other thing with themes and WebDirect is you create your theme for say, the desktop. When you go to WebDirect, you want to create its own separate theme. You want it to be as clean as it possibly can be, with as few styles as possible. And when you create a button, let's say I create a rounded button, and on one particular layout, I just want it to have a straight edge. If you don't create that as its own style, WebDirect has a hard time rendering what it should be, and it might still show it as rounded. So those are just some things to keep in mind with WebDirect. And for FileMaker Go, you want your fonts and your fields to be larger, so because you're using your finger now, not a mouse. The Go platform allows you to lock things, so you can keep your solution vertical or horizontal. You can keep the zoom locked. But if you don't, then there are some things to consider. What happens if I'm in vertical and I turn my phone like this? So one way to do that is to create two separate layouts, vertical layouts and horizontal layouts, and then have a script trigger. The other way to do it is to have your fields and your buttons or your elements stretch. And the way I do that is with cross sections, and I'll show you an example of that. FileMaker Go doesn't like multiple portals. It's very hard to tell if you have a screen that scrolls and a portal that scrolls. It doesn't know which one you want to scroll. So sometimes in Go, list views are better than portals. And there's no hover. It doesn't know that can't feel the energy of my fingers, so there's no tooltips and things like that. So what I'm going to do now is move on to the demo portion. First thing I'm going to show you is what I was talking about with Go and the cross sections. So if you don't know, over here there are these templates that you can use. So what I did is I threw a horizontal and a landscape and a portrait template, and that's what these little orange lines are. And so you can see this here is the horizontal, and then this here is the vertical. And what I did was I used just this square, the cross section, to design this particular iPad solution. And if we look, when I'm in vertical mode, it looks like this. And when I'm in landscape mode, it looks like that. When I'm horizontal, it looks like that. So that's the idea. And you just have to make sure that if you stretch fields and stuff like that, that you look at it in a stretched view. Just because it looks good on your screen and your one view, once you stretch it, you start seeing maybe that fields are overlapping and stuff like that. You want to kind of keep that in mind. So that was that. All right, so I have these, a bunch of where I didn't follow any of my rules. It's a really ugly, just quick demos of different things to think about when you're designing. But then I have 3 demos with themes, and then so some of these things I'm going to go through really quickly, and then I'll show them to you again in the theme. So the first thing when you're designing is, and by the way, when I start a new project, I most often start with the design over the functionality. I know like what my data is going to be. You know, I've already done the discovery and I know what my data is going to be, and I start to think about what do we want this to look like. And for some of us, design doesn't come natural to us. It doesn't come natural to me. Like I can bake, but coming up with something on the screen it takes me many, many iterations. So don't feel bad if you design something and then have to change it later. That's actually okay, because it means that you're noticing that you can improve. But the idea is that you think about, am I going to do a vertical layout, a horizontal layout, or a combination of both? In my theme demos, I actually did a little bit of all three, so you guys can kind of see how those are set up. Then there's the idea of resolution. You want to design for the smallest screen and then spread out for the bigger screens. Because if you design for a big screen and then someone's on a tiny little laptop, they're either going to have to do a lot of scrolling or they're going to have to zoom out a ton, and then they won't be able to see anything. So there's a couple ways you could do it. One is when you maximize your window, you can have all the fields stretch out. And if I take this and I kind of move it in, you can see how the fields are starting to narrow. Or you have a maximized window, but everything is kind of centered. So the database, your design part of it stays the same, and no matter how big your screen is, it gets bigger, but the elements to your layouts are all stay in the middle. Kind of like websites. You can also do an adjust to fit. So if your client wants to see multiple applications at the same time, then you keep your windows at maybe in the corner at a certain size, and then they can see multiple things. Or if you're like me, you maximize the window, because when I'm in FileMaker, I want to be working in FileMaker, and I know how to use my little command tab to get where I want to go. Maximize, by the way, is not the same thing as when you click that little green dot and you go into full screen mode and it takes over your whole computer. Maximize is literally what it does. It just maximizes to the full size of the screen. Developer preferences and platform considerations. Okay, there used to be a lot of things we had to worry about on a Windows machine versus a Mac. And since 16, which solved some of the window issues, we're really down to fonts. There are 3 fonts that are the best cross-platform: Helvetica, Arial, and Verdana, but they still have issues. So on the right here, those are the exact same layout in the exact same database, but one's on a Windows and one's on a Mac. And you can see how it's getting cut off here, how this is wider and this is taller. So if you develop on one platform, always look at the other platform to make sure you don't have things getting cut off or overlapping. There is, one of the things that I typically do is you can create a new portal record on the fly. So people can just come in here and type what they want. But now what happens? The user has to know to get to the next record that they need to scroll. So I will always do a plus button that takes them to the last record so they can type what they want to do. Again, these are preferences for you, but from a user's experience, you want it to be intuitive enough that they don't have to be trained on it. The other thing is menus. So you can see up here, I have a very narrow set of menus. You can decide, every project is going to be different, but I will tell you there are 2 menu items that I remove always at the beginning of every project. That's the duplicate, because it's right next to find, and people duplicate records all the time and don't even know that they've done it. And the other one is the delete all or the delete found set, because I don't know of any FileMaker user that needs to delete a large chunk of records at any given time. And if they do, you can script that. So I always remove those because people like to be curious and they're always go, what happens if I click delete all? It deletes everything. So I usually lock them out of that. And then there's the hide toolbar or show toolbar. I haven't shown the toolbar, I can't even remember, unless the client specifically asked for it. The toolbar, your users can customize this however they want. All they gotta do is go to customize toolbar. And the issue that I have with it is, let's say I don't have access to delete records. This delete record doesn't go away, it just grays out. And I'm a firm believer that if they can't do it, they shouldn't see it, because it makes people go, well, why can't I delete? Or how can I delete without them knowing it? I like to hide the toolbar. I also like to keep people from getting into this little row of things. This right here gets you to all your layouts. Now you can hide these, and I actually do. I just didn't in here because this is a demo file for you guys to do what you want with it. And I'm going to show you a reason why I hide those, even though the toolbar is hidden. When I do reports, I tend to do a new window and then kind of leave them in there where they can make an Excel, PDF, print, whatever they want to do, and then when they're done, they can close the window. The issue is that you have to show the toolbar in order for them to get to these items, and then lo and behold, there's the lists. So that's why you want to hide your layouts. You want to hide your layouts even if you hide toolbars. Browse mode, find mode, I like that to be very visual, and I'm going to show that to you in one of my theme demos. Navigation consistency, the only thing I want to say there is that if you have certain buttons, say to the right, don't make them over to the left on another layout. And if you have your button bar starting at 30 pixels from the top, don't have it shift on another layout. It just makes the screen jump, and it can be very annoying for the user. The tools that I use the most are these position here. I line things up by the pixel, and I use a lot of these alignment tools. But there are grids down here, and you can snap to grid. I just don't find those as reliable. And then parts versus headers. The top navigation and the bottom navigation, I love those because what's great about them is if I zoom in here, so now when I'm scrolling my body, you'll see that the header and the footer, or the top and the bottom, they stay there. So you can see the buttons, the navigation all the time. But the issue is, let's say I design a screen for this resolution, and then somebody gets on their laptop and only has this. Those buttons in the navigation part, they're hidden, and I can't scroll to them. They don't scroll. Only the body scrolls. So you have to figure out whether the part versus the header works for you. The issue with the header is that when I scroll, my buttons go away, and I don't even see my footer until I scroll to the bottom. And then the only thing to keep in mind there is on a list view, the header and the footer, they do stay static, but on a detail view, they don't. So again, all of these things are just things to consider when you're designing. You come up with your own preferences. That's the idea. You're the developer, so you get that ability to decide these things. I always script my buttons, even just new record. Just because it's one script step, I still make it a script. And the reason I do that is I actually had new record in a solution, and the client said, you know what, people keep clicking that button, and can you just add a dialogue? Are you sure you want to create a new record? So I went, I added that step to the script, and it was fixed everywhere. If I had done a single script step everywhere, I would have had to go to each layout and fix it. So that's just kind of one of my things. I script everything. Dialogues, popovers, and cards. Let's talk about the differences in those. A dialog window dialog, you can see I'm clicking, I don't know if you can hear it. It's not letting me do anything. This is blocking everything until you address what's happening here. If I do a dialog document, I can click back here and now my dialog's gone. Now I do the document window for reports, but you do have to keep in mind that the user may click somewhere and that window goes away and they have no idea where it is. Popovers are great if you haven't played with them yet, hopefully you have. The user has to know, if you don't put a little close button, the user has to know that they have to click out. And before cards came along, we came up with a full popover. So it takes your vision into just the context you want. Keep in mind also the popover is the context of the layout that you're on. Where cards, like I love these things, I use them all the time. This layout, this card layout can be any context I want. It's attached to the layout behind it, but it doesn't have to be the same context. And what I do for every table occurrence, I have a developer layout, and then I also have a utility layout. The utility layouts contain no fields, they're all the exact same size, and they have the same global variable on them. So if I'm creating a script that I need several different contexts, I can open a card with a little, creating contact, please wait. I can go to context, do what I need to do. I can switch over to addresses, do what I need to do. Maybe another context, do what I need to do. When I'm all done, I can close the window. I'm back where I started, and the user never knows that they've been to 3 different places. So cards are really great that's one of the reasons they're great. There's a lot of uses for them. And I'm sure there's a session here that someone did on cards with some cool tips and tricks. And so then there's button bars and buttons / popovers. Since they came out with the button bar, I have never created a button or a popover. If I need a single button, I create a button bar and then I just make it a single button. So there's a few reasons for that. One is a button bar, you can use a calculation to name your button, but you can't in a button. And when you hide a button, you can see that my button bar just kind of filled in, just stretched, where now I've got this gap here that's missing. That's the great thing about button bars, especially when you have the same layout for maybe different levels of users. So say, for example, delete is a huge one where some people can delete and others can't. If I'm able to delete, I see that delete button, and if I'm not able to delete, that delete button's gone and the button bar just fills in the gap. The other thing with the button bar is, if I create a button and then I go, oh wait, I need that to be a popover, I can just change it. Where if it's a button, you have to actually go up here and choose popover and then create a whole new button. So to be honest, since they came out with button bars, I have never used these down here. Okay, so then there's some user face things to think about. One is, will you use words, icons, or words and icons? That could change from solution to solution. FileMaker did a fantastic job with letting you add your own buttons. One of the issues with that is if you find an icon and you add it and it's white, then it's white. You can't change the color. You have to convert it first. So keep that in mind, and I actually have a website here to show you that. But they didn't do a full, this isn't every button that you probably would need. So the cool thing is there are websites out there, and this is one that I found really useful. It's called material.io, and if you don't catch it, it's in the demo, the link's in the demo, so you'll be able to get to it. But it's got all these different kinds of buttons, and the nice thing is they're all the same. If you want a theme, then you want all your buttons to look alike. So that was one website that I found really useful. And then Geist Interactive, if you haven't seen them walking around with their shirts, they created this SVG converter. So if you get an SVG icon, you just throw it in here, you convert it, and now when you pull that into FileMaker, it goes in, I call it clear, because essentially it's actually gray. Essentially you can assign whatever color you want to it. So that is actually really, really useful. Alignment, the only thing I'm going to say here is this little field is off by 1 pixel, and that just really bugs me. Flow, left to right, up and down, so when you're thinking about how you're designing your screen, you want to keep that in mind. And you want it to look good. That's not, even a 6-year-old probably wouldn't be able to handle that. If you Google design things, you'll come up with a whole bunch of things. But I actually came across this website, which is really cool. You put in a color that you like, and it will give you a span of complementing colors. So if you're not good at that, I don't know how to pronounce it. I pronounce it coolers. It's basically colors with 2 O's. But anyway, if you're not really good at what colors go together well, then have somebody who knows show you. So I thought that was really cool. And that link is in here as well. Tabs versus slides. Tabs are real easy. The issue with tabs is the depth here of the tab, you can't change unless you do like the CSS changes or something. And you can't hide them. So if you've got a tab here with information that some users can see and some can't, then you either have to create an extra layout, or you have to just hide the fields on the tab, and then there's this tab with nothing there, which is, kind of silly. So that's why slides are really good with a button bar, because you can just go to object and it can go to the right slide. And if I'm not supposed to see slide 2, that button goes away. And as long as you hide these little dots down here, I'll never know that slide 2 even exists. So that's the difference between those. And then the last thing is the user experience. The biggest complaint that I get, my husband works for the state of Nevada and they are still on a DOS system. I know, I saw a lot of eyes. I know, it's very frustrating. The thing he complains about the most in any of the systems he works on is the tab order. He can't stand when he's here and then all of a sudden he's down here. I'm like, I'm typing over here. So make sure anytime you add a field, go in and just recheck that tab order, because that can be frustrating to a user. The difference between pop-up menus, pop-up lists, checkboxes, and radio buttons. So a pop-up menu is great in that it forces the user to pick a value from there. But on a Windows machine, it's really slow. So it'll show you the first few values and then there will be an arrow. And then if you want to scroll down, it literally is like next value, next value, next value. So what you want instead is a pop-up list is great because it scrolls really well no matter what platform you're on. And also what's nice about a pop-up list is I can start typing a color and it can auto-fill for me. Here's the issue. I can type whatever I want, and now your data's bad. And trust me, users will always come up with a different color instead of what you have here. So what you do is you validate the field, and then if I try to change that color to something that's not in the list, it yells at me. Checkboxes are multiple selections. Radio buttons are an individual selection, or so you think. Just hit the Shift key and I can choose multiple things. So if you really want only one selection, you need to validate that field. Trust me, people will find a way around, not to be, devious, it's just what people do. But I want 2 colors in there. Repetitive tasks, I'm not going to demo this, just again because of time. What I want to say is build whatever it is you're building, build your script. A to B takes, or your process, whatever, multiple layouts. Let's say that takes 15 steps. When you go through it and you're debugging it, put your user hat on and think, do I really want this to be 15 steps? What can I do to narrow this down? And again, iterations. You're going to have iterations with your design, you're going to have iterations with your scripts, and that's okay. Hidden objects are great because you can kind of guide the user. So if they never check this box, they never have to worry about the additional information. But if they do check this box, then something comes up, makes them check something else. If I choose pink, it gives me these things, these items, these values. If I choose blue, it gives me a whole separate list. Look at that. So you can guide the users in ways like that too. And then there's this little demo in here that I have. This is a way to do an inquiry on a product, and there are 3 ways to get to that product. You can scan a barcode, you can type the barcode in, or you can just type in the description. This demo is 2 layouts. So I can type a barcode and see my data, go back. I might want to type a description. Whoops. See my data. So it's 2 layouts with a bunch of overlapping hidden fields. So that's for you guys to kind of just pick apart and inspire you to create more exciting things than this. This is just a simple demo. Okay, tooltips and clues. There's a few ways to guide users along. So there's placeholder text you can use. And the nice thing about the placeholder text is you can colorize it and make it whatever size you want. There's a tooltip. But I don't know if you noticed how long it took for that tooltip to come up. It's here on field number 2. If I hover over it, it really takes a while to come up. It's actually faster on a Windows machine. If the user doesn't know it's there, it's not very helpful. So just keep that in mind. And then the other thing that I do a lot of times is I'll do like a little eye, and then when they click on it, a little popover comes up and gives them some valuable information. The only thing is, You don't want to overlap it on a field, because if I go into this field to type, then it goes into the background. So I just kind of wanted to show you that will go away because the field is now in the foreground. So that was my quick little demos. And so now I want to show you a bit about with my themes. And yes, I'm a Game of Thrones fan. My thanks to my son who introduced me to that series. So my first demo, this one has multiple colors. It's an adjust to fit, but if I were to pull out, you can see everything stretches. It's a really simple, customers, vendors, products kind of thing. There's not a whole lot in the background. It was really just to give you an idea of some design examples. This one I did both horizontal and vertical, so you can see that the navigation stuff at the top is horizontal, and then the stuff down below is vertical. I don't show toolbars, so because of that, I've got the quick find here that I've replicated. I've got the records down here that I've replicated. So whatever they had access to at the top that I've hidden, I've given them access in my design. One thing I wanted to talk about was when I go into find mode. Visually, I let them know they're in find mode. I change the colors of the buttons at the top. I put a little message up here, you're in find mode. Now FileMaker added these little magnifying glasses, which is helpful, but for some people it just wasn't a big enough visual. So I try to change up the screen a little bit. The other thing that I do is I get rid of, if I have little buttons, like little plus buttons and stuff, those get hidden because in find mode, they're not necessary. So I really like to keep the screen clean. I have a list view here, and the thing about the list view is I always have sorting, ascending and descending. What I do is I do the little gray bar and I sort it, and then like let's say I want to sort by phone number, which is an odd thing to sort by. What I show is phone at the top, because you're not going to show like 1, 2, 3. This gives them a visual that I've sorted it, and this is how I've sorted it. There's many ways to do that. You can bold the word phone, you can underline it, you can turn it red, whatever you want to do. Just give them an idea that they've sorted and how they've sorted. So that was a list view. And as a developer, you have to decide, are they going to data enter on the list view, or is it just a list view to search on? Because a list view, as you can tell, doesn't give you a whole lot of information. There's not a lot of space there. So the detail view is really, so I typically don't allow data entry on a list view. I let people find what they need to find and then go to detail view and enter things that way. So my other theme, this one is where I've maximized the window and I've stretched everything. What I did with this one is I got rid of all the list views, and instead, that's a card. And this does everything that my list view did. It sorts, ascending and descending. It lets me filter. So if I want Brienne of Tarth, then I can click on her here and it takes me to her detail record. So it basically takes away, you can put as much data as you want because it's a card, so I can make that card as wide as I want. But for this purpose, I just wanted to show names. And you can see how quick the filter was, and it brings up the names. The records are down here if they want to just kind of go to the last record and see who's down there. So I didn't have to build any list layouts. I just built the card for the list. And same thing here, my search, I don't usually change this up. I usually do the quick find up here. I do an enter search mode so the user can type in whatever they want. And then I maybe will have a few, find all, find active, whatever the client needs. I'll throw those in there, but my searches are pretty much the same. And then my last demo, I did maximize, but I kept everything centered. This one has a portal on the left, not a list view, where when you click a name, it shows you their detail. Technically, I should have changed this because in FileMaker 17, they have this now built in. But I didn't change it on purpose because I wanted you to see, if you care, how much went into building this portal and the whole, selecting it and, again, filtering it. If I type AR, filtering it, all that stuff. That's now built in FileMaker 17, so it takes all that away. But I wanted to kind of show you just also because if FileMaker doesn't do what you want it to do, it's a hurdle, possibly, but you can still get it to do what you want it to do, most likely. So I wanted to kind of show you the level of effort that went into this, and then play around with FileMaker 17's new portal thing, and see, if you haven't already, and see how easy it is. So this is literally, again, it's one layout for this module, customers, which has a portal, and then the detail views. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to show you how I set up my standards, my fields, and my relationships graph, and then I'm going to show you a little bit about themes. First thing is tables. I just always do them as singular. I never put spaces in the names. My fields, I never put spaces in the names. I like to just type ahead, and spaces and underscores slow me down. So I typically, if it's more than one word, then I just do a capital letter for the first letter of each word. And I put all my developer fields at the bottom with a Z and an underscore, just so the Z doesn't blend in. And then my key fields are always at the top. So that's just me. So we're running out of time, and I want you guys to be able to ask some questions, so I'm going to just really quickly, with my relationships graph, I do acronyms. And the reason I do it this way, my main table occurrence has a double underscore where everything else doesn't. And that's because when you're picking your relationships, everything sorts beautifully. So I could just zip, zip, zip around and find things. Some people do, this is an anchor buoy relationship. Some people do a unified graph, which kind of looks like a spider. And then some people do a combination. Again, Google it. You'll hear all kinds of arguments for or against, and come up with your own, what you want to work for you. Some people colorize their relationships graph, and which kind of works if it's small, but when it gets really big, it's kind of hard to keep track of all the colors. What I typically do is I leave mine gray, and then if I'm working in a particular area, especially if it's big, I'll colorize it. So visually, if I'm scrolling down or over, I can just, oh, there it is, find it really quickly, and then when I'm done, I just take the color away. And then the last thing I want to show you before questions is when it comes to themes, what I do is I always have a page with every element I can think of. Button bars, buttons, tabs, portals, fields, field labels, headers, footers, whatever. And I go in and I assign, and if you look at if I click on a button bar, you'll see that I have green, green outline, magenta, magenta outline, and I create all the elements over here. And then that way, if later I think, that's not a very appealing green and I want to change it, I can change it. And then I can say, save changes to current style. Now, I don't know if you noticed the little red arrows that show up there. Until you actually save changes to theme, that button will only be changed on this layout. If you want it to be changed across the whole theme, then you have to change it up here as well. Okay? But that's how great it is, because if you decide you want to change your mind, you can, and your whole database is updated before you have to go to each little layout. And so this is really, really fun times. But you'll see in my demos for each one, I have just a layout where I have all of my elements. I decide how I want things to look. And then as I'm designing all the layouts, everything just works. For you guys, create a new layout. Let's make it a form. Come in here. Pick whatever theme you want that you like the best. Then you can change it from there. I liked how it was rounded, but I didn't really like the blue. The blue's a little baby looking for me, so then you can change colors, or maybe it was a little too rounded or not rounded enough. So that's how you can create your own themes and come up with your own ideas, is just pick one. There are other ways to do it by getting into the CSS, but since many of you, this is your first DevCon, I would suggest starting with this. And then you can save your themes. So if you look here, the top 3 themes are Demo 1, Demo 2, and Demo 3. Because I've saved my themes. And you can import those themes into other solutions as well. Ready for questions? If anybody has any questions, I'd like you to come to the microphone, because this is being recorded and I probably won't hear you anyway.
Hello, my name is Arthur. I'm with Anchor Buoy Software, and I'm curious to know your design approach for advanced search for users, whether you design for that or you train for that.
One of the things that I didn't show you in the find mode is, on the toolbars you can click and you can see all the hints for how you can find like a date ranges, ... and stuff like that. I've recreated that in my find mode. So there's like a little popover that comes up so people can know, how is it that I search for a date range? They can look at that. It depends on your users. In some cases, in a lot of cases, I do that as a training issue. But because I think what happens is there are so many different ways somebody can find something, and I want to give them the power to know that they have this ability to search. I have a lot of clients that want me to just build buttons to find whatever it is they want to find. So then I build all that in there and then they don't even have to think about it. But if you do want to do like an advanced search, you could do that with a card or another layout or something that gives them like some options and they can click some things. But I probably make it more of a training issue.
Hi, I'm Sabrina, representing a volunteer organization. So what would be your number one recommendation for design when you know there is little or no training that will occur?
What I would suggest in that case is a very guided process. It may involve a lot more layouts, but ask the question, what is it you want to do? They click a button, and then you go to the next, now what is it you want to do? They click a button, and they go to next, now what is it you want to do? And when it comes to actually entering data into the fields, maybe don't give them all the information at once. Again, guide them. Have them answer a few things and then take them to the next layout. So in that case, it might be a little more steps for them to get through, but the steps that they're dealing with are simple and they're easy to answer, so they can kind of get through easily. And then hopefully that way, and especially if you lock it down and you trap for things, there are no errors. There's no data entry errors. There's no them accidentally going to the wrong place.
Okay.
But that's exactly what I would do.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name is Aaron, and I'm looking to upgrade an older system. There's a big entry screen or a home screen where people get into, and there are buttons across the top, and it's all scripted security. So if the employee is allowed in, they can click on a button and either get in or not get into a particular area. What's the best way to only show specific people the buttons that they have access to, or those areas they have access to?
Okay, first thing I would do is change that to a button bar, and then you can actually put hiding on the individual segment and say, if get account privilege set name equals user, hide this. And then when they go in and they're not allowed to get in there, then it doesn't even show. And then the button bar just fills in the screen, so there's no gap, there's no hidden, space there.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Sure. Okay, the question was, if you design a solution for a group that you know is only going to be on Windows, do you design on Windows? And I am going to be honest with you, no. I am so much quicker on this, but I know the pitfalls, and I also know to check it. So I still design on this, and then I go and look and make sure that, and I test it on a Windows machine. I've uploaded everything to the website already, and so you can download it. There's not going to be any updates. Get in the file, it automatically opens with admin, no password, something you shouldn't do, but it's just a demo file. I have a file that I keep on my server, and it holds my themes, it holds my standard fields, it holds my scripts that I use all the time. If I ever develop a script for a client that's really complicated or cool or whatever, and I think, I don't want to have to think, where did I create that if I need to create it again for somewhere else? So I kind of keep a template of my own stuff. And especially now, like even with the custom menus, you can copy paste those, and you didn't used to be able to. So in 17, you can copy paste. So you can really grab all that information, pull it into a new file very easily. So if you haven't already done it, start it. Start playing around with design and coming up with some ideas. And I'm always looking at other people's stuff, and I get inspired by it. I don't rip off their design. I think, ooh, that's cool. What can I do to make it better? I kind of do the same thing with desserts. So start a file and keep that as your own, as your little template to remind you. And over the years, you're going to end up with a lot of scripts that you're going to build over time. And it's going to be a nice reminder on how you did it.